For months, I kept seeing the same pattern repeat itself across the scientific literature. Different studies, different populations, and different countries all pointed toward the same place. The water you drink every morning could be working against you, or it could become the most powerful and inexpensive intervention you've ever made. The difference between those two outcomes isn't the water itself. It is three compounds that almost nobody adds, which cost pennies a day, and whose absence the scientific evidence now links to a chain of deterioration that begins silently in the fifth decade of life. I am a physician focusing on the fields of functional medicine and preventive aging. What I'm about to share comes from years of reviewing peer-reviewed research, following the science wherever it leads, not wherever it is convenient for it to go. Before we go any further, I need to be clear about something important. What you're about to hear is educational information based on published scientific research. It is not a substitute for personalized medical care. If you have kidney disease, heart disease, cancer, or are under any form of medical treatment, please work with your doctor before making any changes to your routine. There are people for whom some of these interventions are contraindicated, and we are going to address that with precision before we get to the protocol. Today I am walking you through the full investigation. You are going to understand what happens to your body's internal environment while you sleep, why that matters more than anyone has told you, and which three specific compounds have clinical trial support for protecting your kidneys, modulating the environment where cancer tries to grow, and activating the cellular renewal processes that weaken after 50. By the end, you'll have a concrete protocol with exact doses, the studies behind them, and clear boundaries about who this works for and who needs to modify it first. Reviewing this specific type of research requires an extensive evaluation of clinical data to ensure that these health protocols remain accurate, highly useful, and relevant to the general public. Let me start with something that happens in your body every night while you sleep, something most physicians never bring up in a routine visit. During 7 or 8 hours of sleep, your body loses between 400 and 800 milliliters of water just from breathing. Exhaled humidity, minimal perspiration, and also some overnight urine constitute this loss. That is not a trivial amount. It is nearly 2 full glasses of water that disappear while you are unconscious. When you wake up in that state, your body does not register it as being thirsty. It registers it as osmotic stress, a threat that triggers a hormonal cascade with real consequences throughout the rest of the day. The first system to respond is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, what we commonly call the stress axis. When blood osmolarity rises from dehydration, the hypothalamus releases vasopressin, also known as antidiuretic hormone. Vasopressin tells the kidneys to retain water, which is basic physiology we have understood for decades. But what the most recent research has clarified is the direct connection between elevated vasopressin and the cortisol axis. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology in 2025 examined this relationship specifically in adults with habitually low fluid intake. Participants with the lowest hydration levels showed significantly greater cortisol reactivity to the same stress stimulus compared to their well-hydrated counterparts. The test used was the Trier Social Stress Test, one of the most validated standards in stress response research. This was not a casual correlation. Hydration directly affects the amplitude of the cortisol response. Why does that matter at 6 o'clock in the morning? Because cortisol already has its own natural peak upon waking, what researchers call the cortisol awakening response, or KR. This morning cortisol spike is normal and necessary. It helps us activate, mobilizes glucose for the brain, and prepares the immune system for the day. The problem arises when that spike is exaggerated by overnight dehydration. When you arrive at it already dehydrated, cortisol climbs higher than it should, lasts longer than it should, and generates a cascade of metabolic consequences. Elevated blood glucose in the morning, even though you haven't eaten, inflammatory signaling activated before breakfast, and muscle tissue beginning to catabolize as an emergency energy source. In people over 50, this has an additional dimension that chronobiology research has documented clearly. The circadian rhythm of cortisol advances with age. The peak arrives earlier and the downregulation is lower. Older adults have a longer window of elevated morning cortisol than younger adults, according to data from the MIDUS study, a longitudinal study that has followed thousands of participants for decades. That means the potential damage of starting the day dehydrated accumulates faster and over a longer period in the age group that is already most vulnerable to its downstream effects on cardiovascular health, insulin resistance, and cognitive function. There is another process happening during those same hours of sleep that has even deeper implications. To understand it, I need to introduce you to the main actor in cellular renewal, autophagy. Autophagy is the process by which your cells perform internal cleanup. They identify damaged organelles, misfolded proteins, and mitochondria that no longer function properly, disassembling them to recycle their components. When this process works correctly, cells stay younger and functional for longer. When it deteriorates, cellular debris accumulates. And that is one of the fundamental mechanisms of accelerated aging and multiple chronic diseases. Autophagy is regulated primarily by two proteins that function as antagonists, AMPK and mTOR. AMPK is the cell's energy sensor. It activates when available energy is low during fasting and during sleep, and signals for efficiency. mTOR does the opposite. It activates when there is an abundance of nutrients, especially proteins and glucose, to signal growth. When you eat, mTOR activates and suppresses autophagy. When you fast, AMPK takes control and autophagy flourishes. The overnight sleep period is by biological design, its watch. While you fast for 8 hours, AMPK drives autophagy, cells perform their deepest cleaning, and stem cells receive maintenance signals that preserve their regenerative capacity. A systematic review published in Cell Regeneration in April 2025 analyzed decades of research on this axis and concluded that autophagy is indispensable for adult stem cell homeostasis and that its decline with aging is one of the central mechanisms of stem cell exhaustion, which is precisely one of the 9 hallmarks of aging, described by Lopez-Otin and colleagues in their landmark paper published in Cell in 2013. Here is the piece that connects all of this to your first sip of water in the morning. When you wake up, you are at the point of peak AMPK activation. Autophagy has been working for hours. Cellular cleanup is at its peak, and stem cells are receiving maintenance signals. That is the moment when the magnesium you have available in circulation determines whether AMPK can continue functioning properly for the next 90 minutes until breakfast activates mTOR and closes that window. The problem is that magnesium in adults over 50 is frequently in deficit. This isn't speculation. Data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, the NHANS, consistently show that more than 50% of American adults fail to meet the estimated average requirement for magnesium from their diet. In adults over 50, the situation is worse for 3 reasons. Intestinal absorption decreases with age, the kidneys become less efficient at retaining magnesium, and common medications like proton pump inhibitors and diuretics actively reduce magnesium levels. Magnesium is not simply another mineral, it is a cofactor for more than 600 enzymatic reactions. Among them are the tyrosine kinase activity of the insulin receptor, the function of AMPK itself, and the production of ATP in the mitochondria, which occurs entirely as a Mg-ATP complex. When magnesium is low, these processes run at half capacity, and the morning window of renewal is wasted every day. In May 2025, a meta-analysis published in the journal Nutrients analyzed 27 publications involving 95,933 people to determine if magnesium levels are associated with metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is the cluster of abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, elevated glucose, high triglycerides, and low HDL. The finding was unambiguous. People with the highest magnesium intake had a 21% reduction in relative risk compared to those with the lowest intake. The randomized control trials included in the analysis showed reductions in the HOMA-IR index, a reduction in systolic blood pressure of 4.18 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic pressure of 2.27 mm Hg of pressure, and a diastolic alongside improved cholesterol. A reduction of that magnitude translates to a decrease of between 6 and 12% in stroke rates at the population level. Let us talk about what your kidneys are doing while you sleep. Every year after 40, the glomerular filtration rate declines by approximately 1 milliliter per minute per 1.73 square meters. This is the normal trajectory of renal aging, but it creates vulnerability. The kidneys are the primary organ responsible for regenerating bicarbonate and managing the body's acid load. As they age, this regeneration becomes less efficient, resulting in metabolic acidosis, where blood bicarbonate falls below 22 milliequivalents per liter. This state accelerates the loss of muscle mass, bone demineralization, and systemic inflammation. In 2009, Aichon de Brito-Ashurst and colleagues published a randomized control trial in the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology, studying 134 patients with advanced chronic kidney disease. One group received oral sodium bicarbonate, while the other received standard care. After 2 years, the rate of kidney function decline in the control group was 5.93 milliliters per minute per year, while the bicarbonate group declined at only 1.88 milliliters per minute, a 68% difference in progression speed. The risk of reaching dialysis was 87% lower. The 2024 KDIGO guidelines now recommend treating metabolic acidosis with oral alkali when serum bicarbonate falls below 22 milliequivalents per liter. While that study involved chronic kidney disease patients, citrate offers broader evidence for healthy adults. Citrate, specifically from potassium citrate or fresh lemon juice, provides exceptional renal protection. The Cochrane collaboration review of 7 randomized controlled trials found that citrate salts reduce the risk of new stone formation by 76%. Citrate inhibits the growth of calcium crystals in the urine by acting as a chelating agent. The juice of half a lemon contains approximately 90 to 100 milliequivalents of free citrate. Its metabolism generates bicarbonate, delivering both renal protection and a systemic alkalinizing load. Current scientific literature often includes the specific phrase "cancer starves." I am going to explain exactly what that means in scientific terms. In 1924, Otto Warburg described the Warburg effect, where cancer cells preferentially use glycolysis even when oxygen is available, generating massive quantities of lactic acid. This creates an acidic tumor microenvironment with pH values between 6.2 and 6.8. This acidity suppresses T lymphocytes, neutralizes chemotherapy drugs, promotes angiogenesis, and facilitates tissue invasion. A 2024 review in Biology concluded that tumor microenvironment acidification is an active mechanism tumors exploit to resist host defenses. A 2020 Japanese study retrospectively examined 28 pancreatic cancer patients. Those with a urinary pH greater than 7.0 who received alkalization intervention had a median survival of 16.1 months, compared to 4.7 months for those with low urinary pH. While we cannot establish causality from a retrospective study with a small sample, the biological plausibility is solid. Modulation of systemic pH is an active area of research, including the clinicaltrials.gov study, NCT 03420480. I am not saying baking soda cures cancer. Rather, pH modulation is a legitimate area of oncology research that justifies discussion with your oncologist. The protocol pulls these together: hydration to stop excess cortisol, magnesium to fuel AMPK, and citrate to protect the kidneys. Think of your kidneys as a filtration plant. Drinking water with citrate and bicarbonate pre-neutralizes acid load, reducing the workload and tubular inflammation. Magnesium acts like oil in an engine. Without it, the insulin receptor and mitochondria deteriorate faster. During the morning AMPK window, your body performs cellular cleaning. If you have magnesium available, AMPK can run at full capacity before breakfast activates mTOR and ends the cleanup. This protocol is a wellness support, not a replacement for medical treatment. If you have advanced kidney disease, heart failure, or take medications like digoxin, lithium, or certain antibiotics, consult your doctor first. Prepare 400 to 500 milliliters of room temperature water. Drink it within 15 minutes of waking. The first component is the juice of half a fresh lemon for citrate. Use a straw and rinse with water to protect dental enamel. The second is 1/4 teaspoon of pure food-grade baking soda powder for 12 milliequivalents of bicarbonate. For normotensive adults, this 119 milligrams of sodium is safe. The third is 150 to 200 milligrams of elemental magnesium, preferably glycinate or citrate. Avoid common mistakes. Do not start with maximum magnesium doses. Do not skip the lemon, and wait at least 20 minutes before eating breakfast to allow the AMPK window to function. Expectations should be realistic. Urinary citrate rises quickly, but blood pressure and metabolic markers take weeks or months. Complement this with dietary sources like pumpkin seeds, dark leafy greens, and citrus fruits. Safety is paramount. Those with a glomerular filtration rate below 30 should avoid unsupervised magnesium. People on ACE inhibitors or with heart failure must be cautious with sodium and potassium changes. Realistic timelines are essential for success. In the first week, you may notice changes in urine color and reduced muscle cramps. By the end of the first month, sleep quality often improves. Between months 2 and 3, metabolic markers like fasting glucose may shift. This is a long-term investment. Navigating health information is difficult due to exaggerated claims, but by focusing on mechanisms and studies, you can shift your trajectory in the right direction. Maintaining health through evidence-based protocols requires a deep investigation into complex biological systems, such as the human gut microbiome and its direct impact on cognitive function as we age. These internal systems silently determine our long-term health trajectories, yet they are frequently overlooked in standard medical advice given to patients. Reflecting on this information and considering how these variables apply to your personal health journey is a vital step toward proactive wellness. By focusing on scientific mechanisms, individuals can better navigate the noise of health information. This research highlights the absolute importance of biological maintenance for a healthier future for everyone.